Hello, namaste, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Cricket for Us. We get the latest cricket news, and today we're going to discuss the West Indies versus Pakistan series, the T20Is, which was like 1.25 games, and the actual Test series, which was really fun. It was 1-1 at the end of it. I've got a brilliant guest from, you guessed it, the Caribbean Cricket Podcast from Michelle. How you doing, man?
All good, man. All good. Very happy to be back on and discussing what was a very eventful, double format series, but a highly eventful series.
Yeah, 100%. I quickly just want to talk about the T20 match rather than series. It was just shocking. I did not expect it to be just pouring down most of it, but the little cricket we saw in the T20 space, West Indies looked pretty good, especially those 9 overs they played. They scored 80 odd. Right? Thankfully, that didn't happen. The entire game didn't happen because it probably would have been a 1-1 series in the T20s as well, because the West Indies batsmen were absolutely smashing it out of the park. And if we talk about, the actual full length, I think it was 16 overs or something like that for the second T20I, if I'm not wrong. I couldn't expect anyone barring Nicholas Pooran to almost pull that off.
Yeah, it was. Do you know what? I think overall, over the piece, it was a shame that we didn't see more matches. And the weather is the weather, and you know what I would say is, because I know a lot of Pakistani fans, if I judge by social media, which is never the best thing to judge by, but a lot were disappointed with the weather. But I think it's not the West Indies' fault. Obviously, the weather's not West Indies' fault. But what I mean is, our cricket is scheduled in rainy season because of T20 tournaments taking up so much of the cricket calendar. Our cricket is now shoved into the rainy season, so these things will happen. That said, as a Caribbean individual, I wouldn't have predicted that essentially 4 matches would get rained out. I wasn't surprised that 1 or 2 did, but it was disappointing to see 4 get rained out, because ultimately, and this goes for both teams wanted the practice ahead of the World Cup. So it was never about, for me, who's going to win this series. It was as much as it was for us as it was for Pakistan. It's about who's ready, what combinations, who should bat where, who should bowl in what phase, and so on and so forth. So it was valuable game time missed out on.
Yeah, and from a West Indian perspective, I would say you're almost there. Like with Pakistan, I'm telling you, Shoaib Malik's going to come back. Imad Wasim's there's going to be so many changes, right? And there's going to be like 2 or 3 big changes that are going to happen. But from a West Indian point of view, barring maybe Sunil Narayan, just as a thought, but barring that, I don't see anyone else coming into this T20 squad, because it's so jacked. It's like 9 players all around the world, T20 formats for the past 10 years, 8 years, or something like that. Is just outstanding. So I think the backup that West Indies has is great, and that's why they're in T20 as the reigning champions at the moment, only 2-time champion as well. But at the same time, they're also the only team that could match the unpredictability of Pakistan. Even with a side like that, they could get bowled out for 60, but with a side like that, they could score 250 and bowl the other side out for 60. So it's very entertaining cricket. And if it happened the way that I would have liked, if there were 4 or 5 matches, Pakistan would have lost the series. But that's all fine. That's all right. At least we won this series in this case. A series that I predicted, almost everyone I know probably predicted, barring Nikhil, that Pakistan was going to win. And they didn't. And largely due to some very, very good performances from the West Indies bowling lineup, especially Jaden Seals. What a find he is.
Well, to be honest, he's just the next one on the production line. Off the production line, I should say. And even today, I was discussing with my co-host Santoki that West Indies will never want for talent. I think when you think about the size of the region, we constantly produce super talented youngsters. What we struggle to do is help them convert from seriously talented youngsters to very good they're already adults, but very good professionals later on in their careers. Something goes missing. So to me, Jaden Seals is just the next person. And if you look at Alzari Joseph, where Jaden Seals was at 19 is similar to what we were saying about Alzari Joseph at 19. Now, obviously, when you look at an Alzari Joseph, great strides in white ball cricket, not so much in red ball cricket, because again, it's that gap between super talented youngster how do we nurture their development? So super happy for Jaden. Great to see him really burst onto the scene, and this hasn't come by surprise. He was part of the West Indies touring squads to New Zealand. He's been part of the squad, developing in the background, essentially playing in the nets, playing in some first class games, practice games, etc. So when they unleashed him on Pakistan, it really wasn't a case of, I wonder what's going to happen. They expected good things to happen. So, I mean, all power to him. Of course, the pessimist in me now is worried that, as with all talented West Indians, it won't be long. It will not be long before franchise eyes start turning to looking at him and going, will he be somebody we can use in white ball cricket? And then that brings its own, or T20 cricket, I should say, and then that brings its own level of disruption.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because that's what I was going to say. There are so many talented West Indian players. There's not many. The only ones that I can think of are more experienced individuals like Kemar Roach, like Shannon Gabriel, pace bowlers who come in who probably too old or too, like, they're more concerned about Test cricket than anything else. And they realize how good Test cricket can be if they put their mind to it, if they try and concentrate just on that. A lot of the youngsters, as you correctly put, go into a slightly different direction because of probably because of the management. And I've seen that with Pakistan cricket. I've seen it with almost every single cricketing nation around the world, right? With Pakistan in particular, you mentioned Jaden Seals or Alzari Joseph. I can think of before Hassan Ali got that injury, same thing was happening to him in Pakistan, because it's the nurturing point that messes up in a lot of these cricket associations, which just kind of hits me a bit too hard. And I know I've gone on a sidetrack, but basically I think it's very similar from a Pakistani standpoint as well. There's some young talents that come in, they start concentrating on T20 cricket rather than Test cricket or red ball cricket. And the end result is when they try a red ball again in about 3-4 years, it doesn't work because they haven't done it. They haven't played first class cricket. They've been playing T20 leagues all around the world. And when you get that red ball in a 4-day game, after about 6 overs, they're like, we're knackered. We're going to go off the field for like 20 overs, right? That just happens. But yes, Jaden Seals, great talent. Kemar Roach, again, not just with the ball, but actually, I want to talk about that innings. That honestly, going to sound really bad. I did not expect Kemar Roach to last that long and win West Indies' game. I genuinely thought, he's going to score, 15, 20 maybe? And then he's a goner. He's not going to start smashing or, edging things that is going to go for 4. But who knew Pakistan would drop some catches? But first off, Michelle, what did you think of that performance by Kemar Roach?
I mean, first things first, let's get this straight. Do you know what? I was about to say Pakistan lost that match, West Indies didn't win. But that would be... It's not that simple. It kind of is, but it's also not that simple. Because when you pull off a 1-wicket victory like that, kudos does have to be given to the batting side, whether it was the lower order batsmen, tail ender batsmen, whatever you want to call them, whether it was them or not. If you pull off any kind of win in those circumstances, you have to be given your props. That said, West Indies needed about 50 odd runs when there were only 3 wickets left, basically Josh De Silva and the tail. When Josh went, it was 26 runs with only 2 wickets left. When Jamel Warrican went, it was 17 runs or maybe 19 with 1 wicket left. Given how Pakistan had run through the rest of the batting lineup, you would have expected them to have taken that final wicket. That said, Roach and Seals batted with relative. If anybody goes and watches that bat, there was no chances created. It was actually a relatively comfortable chase of those remaining 17 runs. So I kind of said at the time that I think Pakistan kind of lost their heads a bit when the victory was in sight and they should have won. They actually almost, I'm not saying this is what happened, but it felt like they didn't just stick to the basics of what had already got them all the wickets. But as you say, they weren't helped by the drops because Roach was one of the ones who was dropped. He was dropped by Hassan. Because I think Abbas had dropped Josh earlier on, and then Roach was dropped by Hassan Ali, and that was listen. I would I might drop that chance too, but I'm not. But I'm not a professional cricketer. If I was a professional cricketer, I would have caught that. So Pakistan were the architects of their own downfall, though. But that is, you cannot take away credit from Roach marshalling that. And the last thing I'll say on Kimar is he's always been seen within West Indian circles as somebody who can hold his bat. But when you look over his career, he's never really got a big score. He's more like I'll stick around for a 57 ball 10 because he's got a very sound defense. And even though we knew he could play better than that, you'd be hard pressed to find many innings that he's played where he's shown that he can actually bat really, really well. So yeah, I mean, win against all the odds, but credit to Pakistan though, because when you lose a test match like that, the easy thing to do is to just crumble in the second test, because there was no way Pakistan expected to come to the West. I don't care what anyone says. I am convinced and adamant even that Pakistan did not expect to come to the West Indies and even lose one test match. And the only reason I say that is because South Africa had just run through us in the series before Pakistan. So there's no way Pakistan could have been coming after seeing that and gone, yeah, we're going to lose a test match to the West Indies. But credit to them for essentially, I know you want to get to it probably next, but when they destroyed us in the second test, and they did destroy us, they did that basically inside 3 days because of all the rain. So that was an amazing turnaround, given how they managed to steal a defeat from the jaws of victory in the previous test.
Yeah, I agree. I think the bounce back was brilliant, and along most circles, as we've said on numerous occasions now, Pakistan did not expect to even lose a test. They thought, oh, the worst would be 1-0 that we win the series. There'll be a draw, rain, whatever comes, but there's no way we're going to lose. But there's a couple of points I want to raise with regards to what you said. I think Pakistan let go. They stopped attacking. And the big reason for the downfall, yes, the drop catches, but bringing on Fahim Ashraf and in a situation where, Hassan Ali and Shaheen Afridi can attack. Those types of situations. Probably not giving Yasir Shah enough of the ball in that final innings. That was a surprise. And then obviously you got to talk about the aggressive nature of certain field sets. But in the end, I would say it was a good victory from a West Indies point of view. But I understand where you come from about, that was a Pakistani defeat rather than a West Indies victory. Now, for me, a positive turn, but for yourself, not as positive turn. Let's talk about the second test. But let's talk about the first 2 overs or the first 3 overs of the game, where Pakistan did basically crumble 2 for 3. That's a scoreline I've only seen once, and that's also Pakistan. They were 1 for 3 against South Africa or West Indies quite a few years ago. And from that, coming back, that partnership between Babar Azam and Fawad Alam, that was great. And that fight back from the lower order as well. We had Rizwan, you had Fahim Ashraf. Where do you think with the ball did West Indies go wrong after that initial beautiful burst by Roach and then Seals? Do you think the inclusion of Joseph kind of took the reins away from the West Indies?
I'm gonna say with that one, I'm sure if we go back and watch it, we could nitpick and we could say, somebody should have bowled a fuller length, or there weren't enough wicket taking deliveries, or there weren't enough balls bowled at the stumps, or there weren't enough balls that made the batsman play in a corridor of uncertainty or whatever. I'm sure we could nitpick. But on this particular occasion, I'm just going to say the Pakistani batsmen batted well. Fawad, and at the end of the day, the two, some would say Rizwan might be in the top 2. But for argument's sake, Fawad and Babar batted well. And to be honest, I remember that we tweeted from our handle after that, as they were motoring along. I think Fawad obviously went off. He had cramp and went off the field, whatever it was. And I remember that we tweeted from our handle and said, this was when Pakistan were like, I don't know, 200 odd for whatever they were. And I said that West Indies just needs to bat well once, and this test match and Pakistan can't win this test match. So it's not that Pakistan batted us out of the game. They bowled us out of the game. Because the deck wasn't bad enough to be, I think we scored 150. The deck wasn't bad enough for us only to be getting 150 in our first dig. And once that happened, the match was over as far as I was concerned. So it's I wouldn't put it on the bowlers and say they didn't do well enough, because they still did bowl Pakistan out for 302. And yeah, maybe that was 50 runs too much, or too many, I should say, whatever. But once you only make 150 in reply, it's the batsmen that have caused the problem. It's not it's not the bowlers, so to speak. So I'm going to give the Pakistani batsmen the credit here and say they batted us out of the match, but then more crucially, they then bowled us out of the match immediately after that.
Yeah, that spell by Shaheen Afridi, those 6 wickets were just amazing. Like I want to describe his bowling as brilliant, but the thing is, I thought he just bowled according to plan. There wasn't anything outrageous that he bowled like beautiful Yorkers and like then bowled like he set up batsmen, yes, but it was just according to a plan. And one thing I noticed, there's a couple of West Indian players who I really rate, but for some reason they haven't worked out as well since their debuts. Nkrumah Bonner and Kyle Mayers. After their debuts, there was loads of talk, and myself included. I was like, they're the next big thing for the West Indies. Maybe they're in some sort of run drought or whatever, but Kyle Mayers just looks a bit out of it at the moment. Is that right for me to say, or do you think he's just in a bad sort of nick at the moment?
50-50. First, I mean, because both of them, we go to Sri Lanka after the T20 World Cup for, I think, 2 test matches. I am fully expecting both Bonner and Mayers to still be in the squad for that Sri Lanka series, just because I don't think you can fully write them off. If they did well against Bangladesh, did well against Sri Lanka, then Bonner didn't play versus South Africa because of concussion. Mayers did poor against South Africa and has now done poor against Pakistan. I think you give them one more series before you start making start asking the really big questions about should they be dropped, this, that, or the other. That said, what the 2 series have shown is that both of them have struggled versus high quality pace. South Africa had it. Pakistan had it. Pakistan didn't have as many pacers as, like, South Africa had 3 top quality pacers, where I'd say that Pakistan have 2. But that was enough, because in the Caribbean, we don't see pace like that very often. And but along with the other batsmen, looked ill-equipped to deal with it. And so I think a lot of the criticism that has come the way of Bonner and Mayers, I've kind of just said, yeah, I hear that, but no one else is doing very well either. So I think Jermaine Blackwood did okay across the 2 test matches. Craig Brathwaite did okay, and Jason Holder did okay. Everyone else was scrambling around, and the reality, if you take Holder out, that's only 2 of our top 6. So I think I can't look at Bonner and Mayers before I look at 2 others in the top 6, in this case Powell and Chase, and say, well, what are you 2 doing? And you're more experienced than them.
Yeah.
So do you know what? Actually, let me equate it to Pakistan, right? We are caught in a situation that Pakistan are probably caught in with their top 3, where it's like, you know what? They're not very good.
I love it.
and you're kind of looking at it going, well, who's going to replace them? Because in the West Indian case, we look at the players and we look at the options to replace them. We're like, well, you're not very good either. So it's kind of between a rock and a hard place here. Like I don't know the Pakistani scene well enough to say that you don't have 2 openers better than the current 2. But put it this way, those 2 didn't look very good. So do you see what I mean? But it might not be as obvious to just drop them and say, well, let's find 2 others, because there may not be 2 others, and you might just have to still keep going with them, hoping that something's going to happen. Do you get what I mean?
I get exactly what you mean. And to be honest, there's probably one, and you need 2 openers to make an opening partnership. And that's the thing. You probably remember Shan Masood. Came back, he was dropped, and then he did fantastically well during the domestic season. He's still got a pretty decent average at the moment, strike rate, everything in red ball, white ball, etc. He might be the one who comes in place of Imran Butt or Abid Ali. There's talks about a player who's been around for years, but this happens in Pakistan a lot, and you probably heard loads of names throughout whatever you talk about Pakistan. You got Sami Aslam, you got Saud Shakil. He was in the squad, didn't play a game. You have Usman Salahuddin, who's batted basically everywhere in the order to try and get back into the Pakistan side. And now he's like, I'm going to go for an opener space because Pakistan needs openers and I'm going to perform as an opening person. And let's see if they pick me. So yeah, definitely. It's the same thing. You try and get those players who are not performing well as much experience because there's not much in the bench. And that's the case again. And I completely understand with regards to West Indies. One thing I was actually surprised about was the fact that Shai Hope wasn't actually considered for the series. He does so well in ODI cricket that it shocks me beyond belief that he can't use the same kind of knowledge or same type of batting prowess, show the same kind of batting prowess in Test cricket. And I think that's shocking to me. And the only person I can kind of relate to that from a Pakistani standpoint is Mohammad Rizwan, because he can't find a way to score runs in ODIs, but does it in T20s and Test cricket. So is there a particular reason why Shai Hope wasn't even considered instead of Powell, who I genuinely thought would not get a game?
So it's a bit of a weird one, this. Against South Africa, Shai Hope started the first test, and let me start properly. West Indies haven't had any domestic cricket since February 2020. None. No red ball cricket anywhere, no competitions, nothing. All we've been able to do is do camps for them, like 30 best players in the region and a couple of intra-squad games between them. And when Sri Lanka toured, we had one tour game of like a President's 11 versus Sri Lanka. Now, in those intra-squad games and the President's 11, Shai Hope has scored runs. And he's similar to the Pakistani batsman you just said to me, who has basically been like, well, the only way I can get back in this side is to put myself as like Shai Hope has done that. So Shai Hope has scored runs and he's done them as an opener. Whether that's a conscious decision by him or not, I don't know. But there is an obvious place at the top of the order because Craig Brathwaite is obviously going to keep his place, but we need another opener. Now, versus South Africa, Shai was recalled to the test side and played the first test as an opener. But in the second innings, Nkrumah Bonner got a concussion. And Kieran Powell came in as his concussion substitute. But of course, Kieran Powell is an opener. So in the second innings of that test match, Powell then opened and Shai Hope, who had been picked to open, had to go down to number 3. That then continued into the second test. And then in that second test, Powell made a 50. Hope made 43. So rightly or wrongly, that 50 by Powell in a test series where only one other player made a 50 meant he got picked to open versus Pakistan, and Shai Hope then got dropped because Bonner had come back from his concussion. So it's a really weird story because we had initially recalled Shai Hope to open, then a freak concussion essentially changed everything up. The replacement batsman then got a 50, which meant you couldn't drop him. Now, this is what I think will unfold. Powell then has now failed in 4 innings versus Pakistan. We are now expecting him to be dropped. And then when we go to Sri Lanka, we expect that Shai Hope's now got his opening again to come back and play as an opener in the position he was auditioning for anyway. It's a really roundabout story. But long story short, we expect Shai Hope to be opening by the time we get to Sri Lanka.
You know what? That is great news. That is great news. And I want to talk about one more point before I ask you the 3 pressing questions that I ask you every single time. Last time we talked, the first time we talked ever was New Zealand, West Indies. And at the time, Joshua De Silva came into the side, performed well. Jermaine Blackwood had been doing great. Jason Holder was batting well, and Craig Brathwaite was getting into form. These are the exact same 4 players who are still performing for West Indies. So is there a case for West Indies looking at someone else outside of their current squad bubble? I know a lot of people have talked about Hemraj as a potential option in the side. Who else is there that could, if, let's say for the sake of argument, Mayers and Bonner do not perform. Let's assume Powell is not going to Sri Lanka. What is the next steps for the West Indies in Test cricket?
Right, I'm going to give you 3 options here. Option 1, which is the fantasy option, which isn't going to happen, but boy, I wish it would. The selectors would sit down with Evan Lewis, Shimron Hetmyer, and Nicholas Pooran, and they would say, lads, come and just play Test cricket. Now, if they just moved them into the Test squad out of nowhere, there would be uproar because none of them have played any red ball cricket recently. But I give that option simply because I think, further to the point you make, sometimes the answer is you think outside the box, and that would be thinking outside the box. You look at 3 of the most talented batsmen we've got in white ball cricket, and all of them have played some form of red ball cricket at some point in their career, and you just say, come on, it's your chance. It's not going to happen, but that's one option. Option 2, which is probably more likely, is that Shamar Brooks would get recalled. Some would say that he was unfairly dropped when he opted not to go to Bangladesh because of COVID and then just never got back into the side as a result. So some would say he was unfairly not recalled, and he's also been making runs in those intra-squad games. So I think he might be next off the ranks. And also, and this is somebody I would have in my team every single test match, it would be Darren Bravo. Darren Bravo was supposed to be in this test match squad, but he opted out due to bubble fatigue and wanted to go home. So I don't know where that places Darren Bravo now in the context of does that show he's not committed? Is that being held against him? And so on and so forth. I don't know. And then the third option is just look at someone. I've got a few names. So I'm going to give, for example, Shiv Chanderpaul's son, Tej Narayan Chanderpaul, is an opener, obviously Guyanese. And whilst some who watch this now will quickly go on like ESPN and be like, what's his stats? He only averages 30 in first class cricket, but he was averaging like 33, 34 until he had a poor, our last domestic season, he had a really good first half and then fell off in the second half, and that really affected his stats. But the reason why I call someone like a Tej Narayan Chanderpaul is because when you go and look at Tej Narayan Chanderpaul, what he does in domestic cricket is he is able to he's hit innings like against Barbados last year, 2020. He got he scored 66 runs off 287 balls. Now, some people would say that is absurd, but as an opener in a side where we just give away wickets freely, I would gladly bring in someone who could just occupy the crease for that long. So there are certainly a few voices within the Caribbean who have said we should be looking outside of what we consider the top 30 and plucking someone out and saying, yeah, we know no cricket's gone on, but we believe in your potential. Who knows if that will happen though?
Wow, I love the 3 scenarios. I would obviously go for the top one. And as you said, it's a dream scenario. Not really going to happen, but if it does, that's great for West Indian Test cricket, honestly. I agree with you there. And I didn't know about Tej Narayan Chanderpaul, so I'm going to Google him and ESPN cricket for him as well right after this. Now, 3 questions. In your opinion, the bowler of the series, batsman of the series, and what was your moment of this series?
The bowler has to be Shaheen. Obviously, I'd love to say Jaden Seals. If it was West Indian only, Jaden Seals, but Shaheen. And I'm going to tell you a quick story here. When Shaheen first played for Pakistan, I actually thought it was rubbish, you know. But can I tell you why? Can I just tell you why I thought that? Because I saw some of his early matches, and I'm thinking about the 2019 World Cup.
Yeah.
And I remembered watching Shaheen thinking, what's all this hype about? Because I knew, obviously he was young and you can't really jump on a young person's back like that. But I just didn't get it at the time. And I'm willing to accept I was wrong, but I'm also willing to say that I think he has just improved massively in the course of that time. Yeah. And to be honest, not just based on how he's bowled against West Indies, because Shaheen has put together a serious body of work, and possibly because he plays for Pakistan, it's just not spoken about as much. It's almost like taken for granted, oh, Shaheen's done well again. But if Shaheen was playing for, I don't know, England and doing this, everyone would be talking about him being one of the best in the world. Do you see what I mean? So it's got to be Shaheen. Got to be Shaheen as the bowler. Batsman... It was a low-scoring series, so it's hard to really say one. So what I guess I'm gonna go for. I reckon I have to go for Fawad, you know, And not because he produced across every single innings, but just more because when you have a low scoring series like this where there was only one score over 300, I'm looking at the batsman who turned up at least twice. And I think Fawad was the only one. Like, he got a 50 and then he got a century. And both times I felt like he was one of the few batsmen across both teams. Craig Brathwaite was another one with one innings where they were like, this isn't an easy pitch to score on. So let me play every single ball on its merit. And I just thought Fawad did that on at least 2 different occasions. And even the 50, I think if we spoke to Fawad on this show, for example, he'd say, I was disappointed with that. I'd expect him to say that he thought he could have kicked on and scored another century in that particular innings as well. Babar got a few. He got a few as well, but I'm going to give it to Fawad from a batsman. Oh, moment. It's got to be the chase in the first innings. Obviously, a Pakistani fan might disagree with me there, but I'd like to think even some Pakistani fans would go, as a cricketing spectacle, that kind of last day, or it was the 4th day, but that kind of whole day was dramatic. And what was interesting to me as well is that we had a concurrent series going on in terms of England and India. Because they're bigger teams, they'll always get the bigger narrative. But that first test match, irrespective of who won it, was an instant classic test match. In years to come, that might be one of those test matches where people, like 20 years from now, they're like, oh, remember that iconic test match between, like, when they're playing like these highlight reels and it's like, oh, West Indies needed 50 runs and 3 wickets left, and they show Hassan dropping it, and then it'll be one of those type of test matches. So I think that kind of last stretch made that whole first test match pretty iconic. And obviously Roach then hitting the winning runs. I think that all wraps around it.
Honestly, the moment, yes, as a Pakistani fan, I would still say that was the moment of the series, in the sense that, as an objective opinion, that was the moment. I actually started streaming because I saw Pakistan come back into it, because I was like, Pakistan's going to lose. They need 160 odd. Pakistan's going to lose. But then they start bowling really well. So yeah, definitely that entire day was a spectacle in itself. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining, man. Honestly, really, really appreciate it. For everyone watching, please like, share, and subscribe to Cricket Forest 2.0, and go over to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all the places. Just type Caribbean Cricket Podcast. First, you'll get the t-shirt, but you'll also get their website. You get everything. All right, please do subscribe and follow them. And yeah, thank you very much for joining. And until next time, take care.